this is Jo from Maths Tutor Me. Today we're doing fractions and we're going to be comparing fractions. So if we're going to compare fractions, first we have to write them with a common denominator. It's very hard to compare fractions when we have different sized pieces that we're trying to compare. So we need a common denominator. That means we need the same number on the denominator. So we're going to be doing something which is called finding the lowest common denominator. Okay, the lowest common denominator is the lowest common multiple of both denominators. So if you've been watching some of my videos, we've learned about multiples before, okay, which is our times tables. So we need to find the lowest common multiple today. So let's give this a go in example number 1. Find the lowest common denominator of the following fractions. Okay, so I have a denominator of 5 here and a denominator of 2 here. So I want the lowest common multiple of both. So 5 has multiples 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and we keep going as long as we wanted to. Okay, 2 has multiples 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and we can keep going like that as well. So this is what I mean. This is the times tables. 2 times 1, 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, or if you like, we're skip counting by 2's. Okay. The lowest common denominator. So looking at these lists, what is the lowest number that is in both of those? Well, 10 is the lowest number in both of those. So the lowest common denominator is 10. Okay, we're not actually going to be doing anything else with that for now. We're just going to be writing down that the lowest common denominator is 10. Let's try that again for B. Okay, so I have a denominator of 6 and a denominator of 4. Let's write down some multiples. So 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2, 6 times 3. Writing 6 times 3 instead of writing 18. 6 times 4, 6 times 5, that's enough. Okay, let's write down some 4 times tables. So 4, 8, 12, 16, and already hopefully you can see that we've done enough, because as soon as we have a number that's come up in both of them, the lowest number, 12. So 12 is the lowest common denominator of those two. Now we can actually have 3 fractions and we can find a common denominator of all 3 of them. We just have to find the multiples of all 3 and the lowest number in that is in all of them. So starting with 2, that's easy to do multiples. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. We could go all day, couldn't we? Okay, then we want 3 times tables. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Hopefully that's enough. 8. Okay, so 8 times tables. 8, 16, 24. That's times 3. Times 4 is 32. Okay, so do we have a common number in all of those? Well, the 6 and 6 is in here, but not down here. So what might be easiest to do is look at the 8 times tables. Okay, 8 doesn't work for a 3 times table. 16 doesn't work for a 3 times table. 24, well, we didn't even go high enough for that, so it looks like we do need to write some more down. So going up by 3's, the next one after this is going to be 21, then 24. Well, that looks promising. And going up by 2's, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. Okay, so they do all have 24 as a lowest common multiple. Now, another thing that you can know might be a little bit helpful for some of you out there. If one of your denominators is a factor of another. So 2 is a factor of 8. All of these factors are going to show up, all of these factors are going to show up in here. So if something's a factor, if something works for 8, it's going to work for 2. So see how 8 showed up, 16's in there, 24's in there. All of these numbers are going to be in here. So I really could have just ignored this line, knowing that those numbers were going to show up in here. And I could just compare the 3 and the 8. Okay, to find the 24. Would have saved me a little bit of time. But you have to be able to recognize that from the start in order to do that. Okay, otherwise you just do all 3 numbers and you find the 24. Okay, question 2. In each of the following, insert a less than or greater than sign to make the statement true. Okay, so we will need to find a common denominator of these fractions so that we can compare the numerators. So we have a 5 and a 9. Now, eventually, after you've been doing this process for a while, hopefully you will be able to stop. You won't have to write this down all the time. You'll be able to do it in your head. You'll be able to think of the times tables. You'll be able to see it and you'll be able to know it without writing it. So 5 and 9, if you write them all out, the lowest common denominator you're going to find is 45. And often the number, you can find it by just multiplying 5 times 9 together is 45. But it's not always the case. There is often a smaller number that can be used. So 45 is going to be my denominator for this one. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite both of these fractions with 45 as the denominator. Okay, so this fraction started with a denominator of 5, and I want to change it to a 45. So do you remember doing equivalent fractions a few lessons ago? What do we multiply 5 by to get to 45? Well, we multiply by 9. So we have to multiply the top by 9. 4 9s are 36. Okay, so 4/5 is equivalent to 3 over 45. Now we want to do the same thing with our 7/9 here. We want to times 9 by something to get 45. We have to times it by 5. So times the 7 by 5, 7 5s are 35. Okay, so now that both of my denominators are the same, they're over 45, then we can compare the tops. And they're actually very close. This one is 36 and this one is 35. This one is just slightly bigger, 1/45 bigger than this one. Okay, so that means this one's greater and this is the greater than sign goes that direction. Okay, I can write that in here as well since that was the original question in there. Okay, so if you have trouble with your greater than or less than signs, there's 2 things you can think of. First of all, you can go the point or the arrow always points to the smaller number. Or the other way of thinking about it is that the mouth wants to swallow the bigger one. Okay, that might help some of you that sometimes get confused with your greater than and less than signs. Let's practice that again for B. We want to find a common denominator of 12 and 9. Now, if we times 12 and 9 together, we get a big number. We get 108. Okay, now that's a pretty big thing to be working with. Can we find a smaller number? Can we find a smaller denominator? A small common denominator for those 2 numbers. Okay, knowing your 12 times tables and knowing your 9 times tables, you will know that 36 shows up in both of them. So 36 is actually a much nicer number to work with than 108. So let's make our denominators 36. I'm just going to change pens. That one's running out. Okay, so I want to change this fraction to be something over 36. I have to times the 12 by 3 to get to 36. So I'm going to have to times this by 3. 5 3s are 15. Looking at the second fraction, 4 over 9. What do I multiply the 9 by? 9 times 4 is 36. So multiply the top by 4. 4 4s are 16. And again, they're very close. Look at that. 15 and 16. So do we need a less than or a greater than sign in between them? Well, the arrow points to the smaller one, or the big mouth swallows the big one. Either way, if you think about it, it is a less than sign, goes that way. For question 3, we want to arrange the fractions in ascending order. Ascending means from smallest to biggest. To do that, we need to have common denominators for all of them. So we need a common denominator for 8, 4, 3, and 10. Now 8 and 4, all the 4 times tables will show up in the 8s. So we don't have to worry about the 4 so much. 8, 3, and 10. Okay, well, 8 and 3, we could get 24 with those ones, but it's not going to work for the 10. 40 would work for the 8 and the 10, but not the 3. Let's go even higher. Let's write down some more 8 times tables. We'll go 8, 16, 24, what's next? 32, okay, 40. So we're getting bigger and bigger. Okay, then it's not going to work for these yet. Next one, 48. Next one, 56, not going to work for 10. Next one, what am I up to? 64. Next one, 72. Okay, and you can see the 10 times table ones coming out here. So there's 40 is the only one that works for 10 so far. And that doesn't work for 3, so I need to keep going. So keep going with the 8 times tables. I'm going to get to 80. Okay, that works for 10. Does it work for the 3? It does not. So we have to keep going. We can keep going to 88. Adding on another 8, we're going to get 96. Then adding on another 8, we're going to get 104. Adding on another 8, 112, and 120. Okay, it works for the 8 because we just on 8 times tables. 120 for the 3, that is actually going to work because if you just think of the 12 divided by 3, yep, that goes 4 times, so that's going to work. And it works for the 10. We have found something that works for all of them. I know it was a bit tricky. This is a bit of a tricky question, this one. Okay, so we want to write all of these fractions with a denominator of 120. So 8 to get to 120. We had to multiply 8 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Not really one that you know in your head, is it? Okay, now we want to do 15 times 5. Okay, might be a good time to have a scrap piece of paper next to you. Okay, and we could do 15 times 5. Okay, because we've multiplied 8 by 15, so we've got to multiply that 5 by 15. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 is 5 plus, 5 times 1 is 5 plus the 2 is 7. Okay, so that's going to be 75 over 120. Okay, let's do the same thing for our second fraction here. It was a 4. We want it to be 120. So 4 times 3 would give me 12. So that means I need to times it by 30 to get 120. Okay, I'm just adding the 0 on. Okay, if I multiply by 30, I need to multiply the top by 30 as well. I'm doing 3 times 30. Okay, I don't really need to do it like this because to multiply that, I multiply 3 times 3 is 9 and the 0 sits afterwards. That's 90 over 120. Okay, now for the next one, I want to turn 2/3 into something over 120. Similar to last time, 120 divided by 3, I can just do the 12. 3 times 4 gives me 12. Okay, with the extra 0 on it would mean 40. I need to times by 40. So I want to do 2 times by 40. 2 times 4 is 8. With the 0 on it, that's going to be 80 over 20. Okay, and my last one here, 7 over 10. I need to change the 10 to be 120, so I have to multiply by 12. Okay, so I'm going to have to do 7 times 12. So remember I said that knowing your times tables was a really good idea. So 7 times 12 is 84. So what we want to do now is we have got all the denominators the same. We can now easily see which ones are smallest up through to biggest. So the smallest one is the one with the smallest numerator, which is this one. 75 is the smallest out of all of those. So that means that 5 over 8 is the smallest fraction. The next smallest is this one, 80 over 120, which was 2/3. The next smallest is the 84 here, which is the 7 over 10. And this one here was our biggest, 90 over 120, which represented the 3 over 4. It's always important to write your answer with the same fractions that you were given in the question. Okay, not these ones that you've changed. They want to see the ones that you were given in the question. Okay, so that was quite a tricky question, that one. All right, your one that you're going to do in the practice time is not quite as challenging as that one, so don't worry too much. But it's time for you to practice. So here's just a few questions. Pause the video now, try these questions, and then restart to see the answers. Okay, question 1. Find the lowest common denominator of the following fractions. So we can write down our 8 times tables, for those practicing doing that. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. All right, that's enough, I think. Then the 10 times tables, you can see 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, so we know as soon as we get to one with a 0 after it that that's going to be our number, because that is a multiple of 10. So our lowest common denominator is 40. For B, we have 3 numbers, 5, 6, and 10. Now the 5, anything that works for 10 is going to work for 5. Okay, so let's just have a look at the 6 and the 10. So 6, we have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. Okay, and again, because we're doing 10, we know 10, 20, 30. We've had a multiple of 10 show up there in my 6's. So our common denominator is going to be 30. Okay, for question 2, we want to put in our less than or greater than sign to make the statement true. So we have 2/9 and 4/15. So what can we times each of those by? We need to find a common denominator. Okay, so looking at 15, it's the bigger number. 15, it's not going to work for this. 30 is not going to work. 45, 45 does work for this. We could change the denominator to be 45. Okay, so I was just looking for the multiples of 15 then. Okay, so 9 times what gives 45? I would have to times that by 5. So I have to times the top by 5. 2 times 5 is 10. The second fraction, I started with a 15 on the bottom. To get to 45, I have to times by 3. Times the top by 3. 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, so now with the less than or greater than sign, pointing to the small one, it'll go that way. Okay, so it's a less than sign that we need. For B, we have an 8 and a 20. So let's think about our multiples of 20 and see if it works for 8. So 20 is not going to work. 40 does. 40 is an 8 times table. So let's make our common denominator 40. Okay, 8 times by 5 will give me 40. So let's times the top by 5. 5 5s are 25. 20, I have to times by 2 to get 40. So times the top by 2, 13 times 2 is 26. Okay, this one is slightly bigger than that one. So pointing to the little one, or big mouth opening to the big one, I need a less than sign again. And finally for C, we want to arrange the fractions in ascending order. Now all of these numbers here are all multiples of 5, aren't they? So let's look at our biggest number. Let's look at 20. Okay, 20 doesn't work for the 15. The next multiple is 40. Works for that, works for that, works for that, but not this one again. The next multiple of 20 is 60. Works for 10, works for that. 60 does work for that, and that. So 60 is going to be my lowest common denominator. So let's change them all to be 60s. Okay, so this first one was 10. I have to times that by 6 to get to 60. So times 3 by 6 gives me, 5 by 6 gives me 30. 20 to get to 60, I need to multiply by 3. Multiply 9 by 3, we get 27. 15 to get to 60, I have to multiply by 4. So multiplying this by 4, I get 28. And 5 what gives 60? 5 times 12. So timesing 2 by 12, we get 24. So to write them in ascending order, looking at all the numerators here, this one is the smallest. So 2/5 is the smallest. Next was this one, which was the 9/20. Then this one, which was 7/15. And this one was the biggest, which is 5/10. Okay, some tricky questions in our lesson today. So you need to practice lots. Finding the lowest common denominator can be tricky sometimes, so please practice it a lot. And then join me next time because we're going to need that skill again for doing adding and subtracting fractions. Bye for now.